The cabin sat at the edge of a quiet mountain community, surrounded by tall pines and the sound of rushing streams. It wasn't just a getaway. It was a carefully maintained property that represented years of investment and care. The owner, who balanced his time between city life and the tranquility of the woods, had built the place to be his personal sanctuary. It was meant to be a space free from noise, drama, and interruptions. But peace rarely lasted when Karen was involved. Karen was the head of the local HOA, a self-appointed watchdog who seemed to believe the community revolved around her approval. She had a reputation for policing everything from lawn ornaments to the color of mailboxes. Residents whispered about her constant surveillance and how she frequently bent rules to suit her own desires. Yet, what happened that week would make all of her past behavior seem small in comparison. The owner had planned to spend the week working remotely from the cabin. His schedule was packed, but he had prepared the place meticulously, ensuring everything was in order. That morning, he was seated in his study, preparing for an important virtual meeting with the state's attorney general. The meeting wasn't about local issues. It concerned a larger state project tied to land rights and infrastructure, work that required his full attention. As the meeting began, his focus was interrupted by a sound outside, the crunch of tires on gravel, followed by the creak of a door shutting. At first, he thought it might be a delivery, but then footsteps approached the cabin, firm, uninvited, and far too familiar. Within moments, the front door rattled as if someone was testing it, and before he could react, it swung open. Karen stepped inside. She didn't knock. She didn't wait for permission. She simply barged into the private cabin with the air of someone who thought she owned it. She clutched a clipboard and scanned the living room like a self-declared inspector. Her eyes darted across the furniture, the flooring, even the family photos, as though she were assessing violations only she could see. The owner, still connected to the attorney general on the call, sat frozen for a moment in disbelief. This wasn't just nosiness. This was trespassing. This was a blatant invasion of his home. Karen hadn't just overstepped. She had crossed into criminal territory. Meanwhile, Karen muttered to herself as she moved about, noting potential concerns with the cabin's interior, as if she were conducting an official audit. She walked toward the kitchen, opening cupboards, glancing at fixtures, and behaving as if the space belonged to her HOA jurisdiction. She didn't even notice the faint sound of voices coming from the study where the meeting continued. The Attorney General's team was still speaking on the call, laying out their agenda, while the owner tried to maintain his composure. His mind raced. Should he confront her immediately? Should he let her expose herself further? The situation was surreal. An HOA president brazenly breaking into a private cabin while he was in a live meeting with one of the most powerful legal offices in the state. It was almost too perfect. Instead of reacting, he decided to let her dig her own grave. He quietly adjusted the microphone and camera so the officials on the call could see and hear the intrusion unfolding in real time. Karen had no idea that every step she took, every line she mumbled about inspections, was being witnessed by people who held far more authority than her petty HOA ever could. The Attorney General's staff, visibly surprised, began exchanging glances. They understood the gravity of what was happening. A homeowner's rights being violated in plain view during an official meeting. The owner leaned back in his chair, letting Karen continue her unauthorized inspection. She was unknowingly writing her own downfall, every second of her trespass being documented live. And in that moment, he realized the power had shifted. This wasn't just a boundary dispute anymore. This was evidence. Evidence strong enough to expose Karen for what she truly was. Karen continued her so-called inspection, oblivious of the fact that she had become the centerpiece of a meeting far beyond her imagination. She moved through the cabin with the same smug determination she always carried, scribbling notes on her clipboard as if she were documenting grave violations. She measured the distance between shelves with her eyes, tapped the walls like she was checking for structural weakness, and even opened a closet as if she had any authority to look inside. The Attorney General and his staff sat silent for a moment, processing what they were witnessing. It was clear to them this was not an innocent mistake. Karen wasn't delivering a notice or checking on a safety concern. She was trespassing boldly, without hesitation, and with the confidence of someone who had convinced herself she had control where she absolutely did not. The owner remained calm. He let her wander further, each step adding to the record. Every second she stayed in the cabin, the case against her grew stronger. It wasn't just a violation of privacy. It was a blatant abuse of power, a misuse of her HOA role that bordered on harassment. Finally, Karen made her way toward the study. She stopped in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her eyes narrowing as she spotted the owner at his desk. But instead of being embarrassed or startled, she gave him a look that almost dared him to challenge her. She acted as if she were entitled to be there, as if she could demand explanations on the spot. What she didn't realize was that the webcam was capturing her every move. Not only the Attorney General, but also the entire team of legal experts were watching her trespass live. They saw the arrogance in her stance, the confidence in her voice as she announced that she was conducting an inspection of the property. The owner didn't say a word. He let her speak, let her outline the supposed violations she thought she had uncovered. She listed things like the cabin's exterior lighting, the placement of firewood near the porch, even the color of the curtains. It was absurd. None of these details were within HOA jurisdiction, especially not inside a privately owned cabin. The Attorney General's assistant leaned forward, whispering to colleagues, while others began taking notes. This wasn't just an HOA issue anymore. It was evidence of trespass, harassment, and overreach happening in real time. Karen, growing bolder, began lecturing the owner about rules she had invented, as though she were the ultimate authority. But in reality, the only thing she was doing was digging her own grave deeper. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that this wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. She had broken in, assuming no one could stop her. And then the moment came. The Attorney General himself, who had been silent until now, finally addressed the owner directly. His tone was calm, but his words carried the weight of the law. He acknowledged what they had all just witnessed, assuring the owner that the incident had been documented and that action could be taken immediately. Karen's expression faltered. For the first time, she realized something was off. She glanced at the laptop screen, noticing unfamiliar faces on the video call. Her smugness wavered as it dawned on her that she wasn't just talking to the cabin's owner. She was performing in front of the state's highest legal authority. The room grew heavy with tension. Karen stood frozen in the doorway, clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. The power she thought she had evaporated in an instant, replaced by a dawning realization that she might have finally gone too far. But the owner remained calm, silent, letting the weight of her mistake sink in. He didn't need to raise his voice or argue. The evidence spoke for itself. And now, the law was on his side. Karen had trespassed into the wrong cabin, at the wrong time, in front of the wrong audience. And the storm that was about to fall on her was only just beginning. The consequences. Karen stood frozen in the study doorway, her confidence slipping away with every passing second. The smug posture she had carried into the cabin was now replaced by hesitation, as her eyes darted nervously between the owner and the unfamiliar faces on the laptop screen. She had barged into this home believing she was untouchable, but suddenly, the illusion of control shattered. The Attorney General's office wasted no time. They asked the owner to remain calm, assuring him that everything had been documented. The video recording of Karen's break-in, combined with her self-incriminating statements, was more than enough to trigger an official response. Karen, realizing too late that her actions had been broadcast live to some of the most powerful legal figures in the state, tried to backpedal. She claimed she was just checking for safety hazards, that she was acting in the community's best interest. But the excuses rang hollow. Everyone on the call had seen the truth. This wasn't concern for safety, it was control. It was trespassing dressed up as authority. The owner calmly muted the call for a moment and asked Karen to leave. His tone was steady, not confrontational, but it carried the weight of someone who knew the law was on his side. Karen hesitated, clutching her clipboard like a shield, but eventually retreated, slamming the door behind her as she stormed off. But the damage was done. Within hours, the Attorney General's office followed up, requesting statements and additional security footage from the property. They moved swiftly, contacting the HOA board to inform them of the incident. The board, blindsided by Karen's recklessness, quickly distanced themselves from her, claiming they had never authorized her to inspect private property, let alone enter someone's home uninvited. By the end of the week, Karen found herself facing serious consequences. A formal complaint was filed for trespassing and harassment. The HOA board stripped her of her position, removing her authority entirely. For someone who had built her identity on control and intimidation, it was the ultimate humiliation. Word spread quickly through the community. Neighbors who had once cowered under Karen's constant watchful eye now spoke freely about her downfall. They shared stories of her nitpicking, her power plays, her endless obsession with rules that never seemed to apply to herself. With her removed from power, the neighborhood felt lighter, freer, almost as though a heavy shadow had been lifted. As for the owner, he didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He had allowed Karen to expose herself, and the law had done the rest. His cabin returned to the quiet sanctuary it was meant to be, no longer tainted by Karen's intrusion. Karen, meanwhile, disappeared from community meetings, her reputation permanently scarred. She was no longer the enforcer of rules or the self-proclaimed guardian of the neighborhood. She was a woman who broke into the wrong cabin at the worst possible time and ended up being witnessed by the Attorney General himself. And that became the story everyone remembered. In the end, Karen's arrogance destroyed her. She had believed she was untouchable, but the truth caught up with her in the most public way imaginable. The owner had his peace, the community regained its freedom, and Karen's name became a cautionary tale whispered whenever entitlement tried to rise again. Because if there was ever proof that no one is above the law, it was this moment. And Karen learned it the hard way.